Remember when Trudeau visited China in 2016? It was a simpler time. He was doing Tai Chi, things were very relaxed.
And now China hates her guts. Hello and welcome to Backbenchers, your bi-weekly snapshot of Canadian politics. I'm Mohammed Omar.
I'm Ryan Maloney, and look, it's been a complicated, challenging couple of months for Canada on the world stage, in large part because we've been caught in the middle of a tug of war between two angry uncles, the United States and China.
Assuming your angry uncles are global superpowers fighting for world dominance. This dispute has involved everything from arrests to counter-arrests to death penalties to firings. But let's rewind a little bit. How did Canada get into this mess in the first place?
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
So back in December, in the middle of a trade war between the United States and China, the US tapped Canada on the shoulder and asked our authorities to arrest Meng Wanzhou. She's a high-ranking executive at Huawei Technologies, accused by the US of violating international sanctions and fraud.
So the reason Canada arrested her is because of an extradition treaty we have with the United States. So, when she was arrested, China lost their shit. They said this whole thing was bogus, that it was political, and they fired back by arresting 2 Canadians in China who were reportedly being held in a room with the lights on 24/7.
They also upped a sentence for a Canadian accused of drug smuggling from 15 years in prison to the death penalty.
Canada is a country of the rule of law. We have a justice system that is not subject to political interference. It is unfortunate that China has arbitrarily and unfairly detained 2 Canadian citizens.
So with all this tension bubbling up, it was really important for Canada to have an experienced point person in China to help calm things down.
Now, diplomats represent the government, so they're not supposed to offer any personal opinions. Someone should have told that to John McCallum, our former ambassador to China.
I think she has quite good arguments on her side. One, political involvement by comments from Donald Trump in her case. 2, there's an extraterritorial aspect to her case. And 3, there's the issue of Iran sanctions.
So back in December, Donald Trump said he might be willing to intervene in Wanzhou's case if it meant scoring a trade deal with China. McCallum then told a group of Chinese-language reporters that Trump's comments could help Wanzhou make a pretty strong case that this whole thing was political.
This, of course, blew up in Trudeau's face, and he started getting calls to fire McCallum. But he didn't. And just a few days later, McCallum did what anyone with their job on the line would do. He doubled down, and he said it would be great for Canada if the US could just stop all of this and make it go away. Instead, Trudeau made him go away and fired him.
So to put it lightly, this has put Canada in an extremely awkward position.
But was there really anything we could have done to avoid this mess? We reached out to Stephanie Carvin, an international relations professor in Ottawa, to help us make sense of all of this. How would you describe the relationship between Canada and China in one word?
I'm just going to borrow from Facebook and say it's complicated.
Unfortunately, this is one relationship we can't just ghost until we awkwardly run into them again at the next G20. Carvin says she's surprised how quickly China has become hostile with Canada. On top of arresting Canadians, certain Chinese officials have referred to us as whores, white supremacists, and worst of all, as my grade 4 bullies used to call me, frightened birds. But could Canada have avoided this whole spat in the first place?
We've seen a lot of political figures in Canada basically say this would have been a good time for Canada to look incompetent and to kind of, be like, oh, well, we tried, but she snuck through and there was nothing we could do. We couldn't get our act together. I mean, I think this would not have looked particularly great to the United States. But also there's, I think, an issue here of the rule of law. We don't deliberately skip out on applying the rule of law, whether it is a low-grade criminal or a billionaire from China.
As you know, our former ambassador John McCallum was fired for speaking out on this issue, not once, but twice. What was so bad about what he said?
If we're convincing our allies to speak up in defense of the rule of law, and suddenly your ambassador is saying that, well, there could be some horse trading involved, you're not only undermining our message here in Canada, you're undermining our allies who've, kind of stuck their neck out to support us as well. This was a pretty bad move by Mr. McCallum.
With McCallum out, some experts have suggested sending a special high-level envoy to China, like a past prime minister, to help sort things out. But where does Canada go from here?
I think that a lot of people have said that, the relationship between Canada and China has hit rock bottom. I personally believe that's optimistic. I think this could get a lot worse before it gets better. There's the risk of further Canadians being detained, as well as some risks of, economic retaliation against Canada as well. I'm not sure this is just Canada that's going to suffer the consequences here. I think other countries are looking at China and recognizing how really, things can go so bad so quickly, and that might end up hurting them in the long run.
Carvin says diplomacy with China is a delicate dance, and that Guangzhou's extradition proceedings could take months or even years. But no matter what, I know I'll sleep soundly tonight knowing this diplomatic nightmare could only get worse.
Okay, I'm glad we ended things on such a positive note.
I think it's safe to say Trudeau won't be handing out Raptors jerseys in China anytime soon.
Yeah, and it wasn't supposed to be this way. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came to office seeking a reset with China, especially if it came with a juicy trade deal. China's a large prize, the world's second biggest economy, but there have always been big questions about its approach to human rights. Back in 2006, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper famously said that when it came to China, Canadians don't want us selling out to the almighty dollar. In 2012, though, things were warm and fuzzy. In fact, they were straight up panda fuzzy. Trudeau said that while the other guys were hot and cold on China, he was ready to both do business and press them on human rights, just like a straight-talking buddy. He made a big visit there in 2016 to talk trade, but he also earned himself a fun little nickname.
The Prime Minister has been given a fond nickname in China. He is called Tudou, which I believe means potato, and I can't say the Chinese word, it's Xian Tudou, little potato, because his father, Pierre Elliott Tudou, was senior potatoes.
He went back again in 2017, but was unable to secure that elusive trade deal. Now, a big part of Trudeau's plans for China, and really anything these days, is Donald Trump. When Trump hit us with tariffs, there were plenty of people who said, maybe we should rely less on the States these days and more on other markets like, oh, I don't know.
China, 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 China.
But when we renegotiated NAFTA, a clause was included that makes it very difficult for Canada to strike its own deal with a non-market economy, which is a fancy way of saying
China.
So now, instead of celebrating some grand reset or a major trade deal, Little Potato finds himself getting mashed between our biggest ally and a complicated market that we can't afford to ignore.
And if this wasn't tough enough for Trudeau, he's dealing with all of this in an election year, which means the Tories are already attacking him on the China file to paint him as a weak leader on the global stage.
And while it's easy to get caught up in the political drama around this, it's important to remember that at the heart of this story are those Canadians who've been detained in China for months, so the story is only going to get more complex and more important to watch.
Absolutely, and that's our show. Thank you very much for watching. For more on this important story, check out HuffPost.ca or find us on YouTube. And we'll leave you now with my favorite moment from the last 2 weeks.
All right, so we're here today, and thank you.